This is the Brain, and you're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network. Yes!
Hello and welcome to episode 233 of the Cinema Geeks. I am one of your Cinema Geeks, Optimus Solo, and joining me, as he usually is Dan. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going well. We have made it, I feel like, across some sort of finish line. It feels like in my head. Like, I feel like I just crammed for a final and like it's about to be over. The final's about to be over, and then I'm just going to be able to be like, what TV shows have I missed in the last month that I want to watch?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's going to be a thing. So we are here today to do what we haven't done in a while, Dan. I looked back, and the last time we did one of these was 2019.
Yeah, that's been a bit.
So it has been a while. Yeah, pre-COVID was, I think, the last time we did a top 10 of the year for films. So we're getting back into the swing of things. Last year, we did do the box office and the most anticipated, but we didn't do like the top 10. So we're going to actually give you guys our top 10 films of 2025. It feels good to finally be doing this again, Dan.
It does. This is the most movies I've watched in 1 year. Like, to put it in perspective, in all of 2024, I watched like 17 movies total. I'm not like new movies, just total. But last year, like, looking at Letterboxd, it was like 250 something beyond. So there was a lot of reasons for that. But also just getting back to the podcast and all the retrospectives we did too certainly contributed to it. But yeah, so, and then this last few weeks, just cramming in all the 2025 movies. It's been fun.
I should have done a count of what I don't know what the number is for how many films I watched last year. I feel like it has to be the highest since at least 2019, if not a little bit before. I did look at like the number of films I watched strictly from 2025, and back when we were like really pumping out movie reviews and movie content from, I would say, like what, 2015 to 2018, 19, somewhere in that range. I feel like I watched over 100 films every year that was from that specific year. I think like the most I got to was maybe 120, 130-ish. And I believe for last year, I at least eclipsed the 70 mark. I think I'm like 72-ish films from 2025. So it feels good. Like, it feels good to be kind of like back in that kind of frames, mind work. And then I guess if you add all of our stuff that we watched for Hitchcock and Cary Grant and things of that nature, I probably got up there in the number. I don't know what that number is. I'll have to look after the fact, I guess. But so we're going to do a little back and forth where we count our 10 through 1 films down. At the end, we will give a few honorable mentions that we want to call attention to that haven't been talked about so far in the podcast. And we'll kind of just wrap it up with our experience overall for 2025, what we thought of the year in film, and maybe any themes that popped up, or just however we want to kind of summarize our experience with the films of 2025. Dan, anything else that we need to cover before we just get into our number 10 pick?
I'll just say, like, we'll probably get to it, but there's still a lot of stuff I haven't seen. So
yes,
and so, you know, Marty Supreme.
I was gonna say we could just call this the Marty Supreme slash what's the other one that there's another one that I haven't been able to see, but like, the Marty Supreme Memorial List, because we have not been able to see that. So
Marty Supreme.
I'm sure there's a few others that we'll mention.
Yeah, Marty Supreme, Secret Agent, and I think Hamnet were some of the big ones.
Oh, Hamnet. Yes, that's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
But yeah,
go ahead.
But yeah, but still, I think even with not seeing those, it was still hard to narrow down to 10 movies. So, you know, interesting.
But before we start giving them, like, I know it's always a struggle to get to your 10, right? And also a struggle to put them in the order that you want them in, et cetera. And, you know, it's an ever evolving thing. Like, as time passes, some films stick more with you. Some films seem to fade, or, you know, they increase or decrease in your kind of like what you think about them. But overall, how good do you feel about the films that are included in your top 10? And then just kind of a thought of like, how deep in your list do you go before you get to a film where it's like, maybe now we've started entering the films that I'm not as high on? Like, how many deep are you where you're still like, I really could recommend this film, I like it and enjoy it?
Oh, let me take a look at my overall. So I watched 100. I made it to 100 films. My goal was to watch 100 films because that way I think like top 10 is top 10%, which
Yeah.
is a good amount. That also includes some shorts though. So I don't know if that's cheating. But so looking at my list of out of the 100 that I watched, all the way up to say I rated 54 of them like 3.5 stars or more. So
Okay.
and like for me, like 3 stars is like fine. So I would say more than half the films I watched, I rather enjoyed, or at least had a positive experience with. How deep do I go with? Honestly, like I feel like my list is very much in tiers. Like my top three are very much close to one another, and then same thing for like 4 through 7, and then eight till about like maybe 24 or so, maybe 20, or like those are very almost interchangeable a little bit, but they have very depending upon the day. So, but I feel very strong. I don't know if I would say like there was a movie this year that like blew me away per se, or like, oh, this is going to be like one of my all-time favorite films, 5 years from now, maybe, with rewatches and things like that. But I can't really compare it. Like I said, I can't really compare it to like previous years because I've missed a lot. But I feel as the last time we did this, I look at my top tens in previous years. I think it's pretty strong. Some surprises. I think a lot of variety as well. So that's a good thing. How about yourself?
I'm super happy with my 10. Like I did have films that ended up in the 11, 12, 13 spot that at one point towards the end were still in the top 10.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of movement probably between like 9 and 13 for me, but other than that I was pretty set on like the ones that I had involved, and I would say probably I go at least 35 deep before I get to ones where I'm like, well, like I liked it, but I don't, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like average, so to speak. So I think like there's just about half of the films that I feel pretty strong about. And then there's like a portion in the middle after that that's like, there's nothing wrong with them. Like they're fine. They're entertaining or whatever. I just wouldn't like necessarily like raise them up or put them on a pedestal or like get excited about recommending them. But I didn't dislike my experience with them. I think there was maybe 10 films that 10 to 13 films that I didn't care for, but that's not too bad out of, like I said, 75-ish films total. So I didn't have like dreadful experiences watching them too much. So I feel a little bit like you. Like I don't know if there's going to be one that I don't know if my 1, 2, or 3 necessarily are going to be as strong in my mind as I've had some of my number ones in the past, but that could change, with time and with rewatches. There's been one specifically that has been climbing that was not in my top 10. Like when I first saw it, I didn't put it in my top 10, but between when I saw it and today, like it has climbed quite a bit. So like you said, just some films just stick with you, and the more they make you think about them after, the more they kind of climb in my rankings, because I feel like that's a testament to the movie if I'm still thinking about it, weeks or months later. So
yeah, makes sense.
All right. So let's get on into the nitty gritty. I can go first, and then we'll go to you afterwards. So
let me
actually, this might shock you. Go ahead.
How much crossover do you think?
Oh, how much crossover? I am going to say that we have 4.
Okay. Yeah, I think
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, 4 is a good number. I'll set it the over under at 3.5 and see where we go from there.
I mean, it could be surprising. I'm not sure. Like we'll have to wait and see how it goes. Like I do keep track. Like obviously, we kind of keep track of each other as we stuff on Letterboxd and rank stuff. But once you're into that number of films that we've seen, not that it's like this huge amount. I know there's a lot of film podcasters and critics out there that have probably seen like 200, 250 plus films that came out this year. So I'm not saying we're like in that league, but once you get so many, it's really hard to be like, well, I know he gave that one 4 stars, or I know he gave that one 4.5 stars, but like, does that mean it make it the top 10? I have no idea. So it's kind of interesting, but I feel pretty strongly that I would predict I feel real good about 2 of them, and then I think there's 2 or 3 others that have like an outside chance.
Nice.
We'll see.
All right.
Could be way more. So I'm going to start somewhere where I maybe don't do very often. I don't know. I would have to go back through. I think I started ranking these on Letterboxd. Maybe 2015 was the first year, even though I think we covered quite a bit in maybe 2014. But I think 2015 was the first year I put it on Letterboxd in a ranked order. I have to go through to see if I've ever done this before, because I don't know if I have, but I actually have a documentary in my top 10, which is rare for me. Just not because documentaries aren't great. It's just I tend not to watch as many of them for whatever reason. I feel like that has shifted a little bit in the last couple of years, and I've started to watch a little bit more on the documentary side. So I do have, I had 2 documentaries that were really fighting for a spot in my top 10, and one of them made it here at the number 10 spot. So I have the film titled The Alabama Solution, which was a documentary film by Andrew, I'm going to say this name wrong, Jarecki and Charlotte Kaufman, which follows the prison system in Alabama from the perspective of the incarcerated leaders of a movement there. And interesting side note, I don't know what bearing this has on anything, but the filmmaker Andrew Jarecki was the founder of the movie phone. Like when you called in to like get schedules for movies way back in the day before he sold it to, I think he sold it to AOL or Time Warner or somebody in like 1999 or whatever. And I guess has then since become like a documentarian and different things like that. But that has really nothing to do with why this is my number 10. I just think this outlines just another part of our quote unquote American story that just gets swept under the rug and nobody talks about. And it was kind of a devastating watch to, not that anything should shock us in 2025 or 2026 anymore. I think we're past that point. Like anything that you thought wasn't possible in our country definitely is and is happening. But it's just another one of those things that's like, really, this is still something that's going on. Like this is still something that has not been solved. This is injustice like tenfold, and just outlines a system that not enough people spend time caring about or crusading for or different things. And it was just a hard watch, I guess, in some respects, because you in a way feel helpless, and you just want there to be like a white knight that comes in at the end of this documentary to be like, and the government shut this crap down and fixed everything and blah, blah, blah. But we just don't have a government that's capable of doing that, apparently. So not to get too political, but I mean, it's just a sad story about this whole prison system. And I know it's called the Alabama Solution, as they outline in the documentary, though this has far more reaching than just Alabama. It's the United States, prison system, basically from state to state, and they showcase that a little bit towards the end. And I just thought that this one was an important one, which is why the other documentary, and we'll talk about it when I get to my honorable mentions, was just as devastating, but I feel like this one may be more important, more people know about, so that's why I kind of gave this one the edge. So I know you saw this one too. What did you think of the Alabama Solution?
Yeah,
higher in your list, and then you can not talk about it.
I didn't. I do a documentary in my top 10. Usually, back in the day, I used to separate them, but I just included it in one list to make it easier. But yeah, I have seen the Alabama Solution. I think it was just recently nominated for Best Documentary for the Oscar, and deservingly so. As you mentioned, it's a difficult watch. It feels like a good continuation of, I don't know if you saw the Ava DuVernay documentary 13th, that kind of talks about, it's more like a holistic look at the prison system, but specifically looking at Alabama. And as you mentioned, it's brutal. And the fact that they're able how this movie came about was, basically through the smuggling of cell phones, and most of this, or the prisoners being able to tell their own story, and being able to then, I found it kind of crazy too, because it covers things like they went on a work strike and I don't remember that being covered at all in the news, and it wasn't that long ago, but as you said, what's really impactful too is that it brings up all these issues, and then of course there is the album solution is that there is no solution, unfortunately, or it's
Right.
more of a continuation of that problem. But yeah, I thought it was a great piece of journalistic investigation, which we need now more than ever, of course. So you always were wary with newspapers dying and more and more corporations owning more and more news. Are we going to get stories like this? So I was glad to see that it still exists in documentary format, at least. So,
Absolutely. What do you have as your number 10, Dan?
Speaking of news, my number 10 is called Good News. This is actually a Korean film, and this was a film that was like on my Netflix queue. Like, what I like about Netflix is I tend to I'll go to the international films and I see, just peruse around and see what's available, what catches my interest. And this one, just the idea, the premise sounded interesting. It's basically this true life story, based upon a true life story of in the 1960s, when hijackers took control of this airplane and they wanted to fly to North Korea. They were communists. They wanted to take this plane and fly to North Korea. And what kind of the Japanese, the Korean, and, of course, the American government kind of worked together to try to construct this ruse to make them land. They would actually land in South Korea, but think it's North Korea, in order to free the hijackers. It's kind of like, the way I describe it is like Argo by way of Dr. Strangelove, because it's very satirical. You may think, based upon that premise, it's about hijackers and terrorists and things like that, that it's very tense, and there are some tense moments, but it is definitely meant. It's actually one of the funniest films I watched last year, or 2020 films, 25 films I watched, as it takes aim at the relationships between the Korean government, the Japanese government, the American government. You have, of course, this isn't that long after, it's only 20 years after World War II, and how that impacts the relationship between Japan and the U.S., and how they're trying to center up the U.S., but also Korea is also trying to butter up Japan. And it's really funny and entertaining. The center of the story is this character called Nobody, and he's kind of the guy who's quietly pulling the strings a bit. You're not really sure. He seems like he's aloof, he's almost like a homeless person, but clearly he's gotten some insight. He's a kind of like a fixer, you would say, for the Korean government. So I thought it was really well executed in the idea and premise, and its comedy, with some really good performances as well. You have another Korean soldier who gets kind of put, who they think can be naive and manipulated to do certain things within this whole process. But I thought it was just a really well put together idea that had a lot to say, that's still really relevant today. Really funny, and like I mentioned, it does feel like it is like a new age Dr. Strangelove, and almost very similar to war room scenes that you saw in that. It's not maybe as surreal, but it is very intriguing. And also, I was hugely bought in because one of the hijackers, their the icon they go to is this character Ashita Nojo, which is a manga, which I also just started reading. And I'm like, they brought up Ashita Nojo, and I'm like, hey, I know that, the Captain America, I know that reference. So I'm like, I actually kind of know, because it's a manga that came out in the late 60s, but it just started coming over to the US recently. So I'm like, oh wow, I actually kind of have an understanding of what they're talking about. So and that's when I realized, oh, is this based on reality? Because that's a weird thing to kind of bring up, but it was. And I kind of did a deep dive into the real life story as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Partially, like I said, it was kind of knew nothing about it, quality wise. It's just on Netflix, and sometimes that surprise watch is often the best. So now I'm maybe giving it too much expectation but I really enjoyed it. I do, and I don't see many people really talking about it. Kind of, it really flew under the radar. I don't know if it even got a theatrical release. I think it was just released on Netflix, at least in the U.S. So it's still there if interested. But it's good news. Like I said, directed by not Bong Joon-ho. I don't probably wrong, but I tried my best. But it was I quite enjoyed it.
I'll have to add that to my list. I've not seen that one as of today. So sounds interesting though. So I will add it to the queue. For my number 9, I am going to an international film here. This one is directed by Joachim Trier. I'm talking about the Stellan Skarsgård vehicle here, Sentimental Value. And I enjoy films that kind of deal with, and this is going to be a theme that you probably hear brought up at the end and maybe a couple different times throughout my conversations of some of the films I have on my top 10, but that deal with the passage of time in different ways. And it reminds me of like what I was hoping for out of Robert Zemeckis' Here movie with Tom Hanks from a year or two ago. Like, I thought that's what we were going to get, something more similar to this in that film, and we didn't quite. But it's just an interesting setting here where we're going to have a house that we get to see throughout the years as different people within this family are residing there, and how that works. And then the relationship here between Skarsgård and his 2 daughters, who are wonderfully performed and acted by these 2, I'm assuming Norwegian actresses, which I am not going to try to pronounce their names because it'll be terrible, but Renee and Inga are their first names, and they just do a fantastic job in this film and showcasing kind of a strange relationship with their father, the Stellan Skarsgård character, who is a filmmaker, writer, director, and then how that kind of intertwines with their lives. One of them appeared in one of his films as a child actress, and another one is a stage performer. And obviously there's some things that have to do with their mother, and their different generations of parents are involved in this. And I just kind of think it was very well executed way to look through the lens of time within this house and within this family and the generations that make up this family, of kind of how different trauma can impact each other in different ways, and how time plays a part in that. And I just thought it was a captivating film that also has a very clever ending, I guess. I don't know if clever is the right word, but it's I didn't realize what I was watching until it was all the way over, and it kind of had me for a second. So thought that was a nice little touch too at the end. And I don't know, I didn't expect myself necessarily to like it as much as I did, but it kept sticking with me after I had watched it, and thought it was worth the recommend. I know it's getting a lot of talk, and it was on a lot of people's probably top 10 lists, so it's not one that's out of left field or anything. But if you haven't seen Sentimental Value, I would at least give it a chance.
That is one that was on my I have not watched it list. I really wanted to get to it, but like it was still like $20 to rent, and I was racking up the charges when it came to renting other films. So unfortunately, I was just like, I'm gonna wait a little bit, but I do plan on certainly catching it very soon.
Awesome.
So
I think you'll enjoy it.
Nice. I mentioned that I have a documentary on my list, and that's where my number 9 is. And this is actually, I think most of my films are streaming different places. This is streaming on Apple. It's one of the earlier films I watched in 2025, but it is Deaf President Now. It is about a story of the first ever deaf college. It was established early on, but in 1988, they had an opportunity to elect a new president of the college, and the people who went there really wanted it to be a person who was deaf, because it never was someone who was deaf before. They wanted to be represented on the highest level, and did not turn out like they wanted to. There was a lot of controversy behind it. And then they kind of rallied to try to protest the decision of the school board and like what they went through. That's part of the story. That's kind of the main crux of the story, is them, and it interviews a lot of the key players in that. And also like how there was a lot of different ideas and different way, like disagreements regarding the approach. You know, you had some of them that were maybe wanted to be a bit more rebellious and a bit more in your face with the decisions they're making. Other ones wanted to take more of a, specific approach, so maybe they weren't ruffling too many feathers, and how that dynamic worked. But I think where it goes beyond just being that story, and what enhances it even further, and why I put it in my top 10, is also it touches upon the way in which like special education existed, specifically within teaching deaf students, and how a lot of it was often to the detriment of those individuals, and it was less about making lives better for them, but making people around them more comfortable, to kind of force them into acting and behaving a certain way like everyone else did. For example, like kids weren't allowed to learn sign language. It's like, no, you're not going to learn to do sign language. You're not going to learn ASL. You're going to learn how to speak. You're going to learn how to act like the way everyone else does. And, but, luckily, as more research went into it, realizing that approach actually was extremely harmful to individuals, and led to a lot of lack of self-esteem. It lacked a lot to depression. And that's a big reason why this moment was so important, was because it was kind of an opportunity to kind of overcome that and show that often people weren't helping them because they wanted to do good. It was more about the way it made them feel in their actions, rather than actually helping out the individual. And it speaks a lot to, like, that's an issue throughout special education in a lot of ways. Like even recently with, the way in which we taught students with autism, and kind of the approaches, finding out a lot of the things that people were doing were not neurodiverse affirmative, and how that actually had some hugely negative impacts. And I think why it's even, you talked about how Alabama solution, how it's really relevant. So is this, because a lot of, the regulation and the guidelines when it comes to ensuring that, everyone's getting the best education for themselves, and not making it easy but equally as difficult, considering that's being gutted in the moment, like IDEA, which is kind of the driving force of that, with the Department of Education, going away the dodo. A lot of questions regarding how that will handle. So, and this was made, clearly it doesn't touch upon that directly, but indirectly, a lot of the issues it brings up reminds of how far we've come, still places to go, just the concern of like, we'll return to the misgivings of the past. So I thought the central story was really strong, but just this ability to encapsulate that, and also just by it being more relevant as the days go on, I wanted to call it out. So it's Deaf President Now. It is currently streaming on Apple TV. So if you're interested, you can check it out there.
I think this is one I'll have to bring up with Amanda too, because she went to school for sign language interpreter licenses and things of that nature. So she might find this especially interesting. It's not.
It probably will make her very mad with some of the things that are done, but rightfully so. So.
Yeah, I imagine it will. But I have not seen this one either yet. So you're adding more films to my queue, Dan. I don't know if I should feel good or bad about this. Anyways, going into my number 8, it's going to continue a theme, I guess, that I started with Sentimental Value, which I forgot to mention. I think Alabama Solution is streaming on HBO Max and possibly Prime, but I think it's for sure on HBO Max.
I think it's Prime to pay, but it's free on Max. So.
Gotcha. My next one is streaming on Netflix. So you can definitely see this one as well, but it also touches, like Sentimental Value did, on time and the passage of time, which I just think is a big through line from a lot of the really good films I saw in 2025. I am going with my number 8 film as a film directed by Cliff Bentley and co-wrote by Greg Quidar, who also did the movie Sing Sing from last year, which was in my top 20. And they followed that up with Train Dreams from 2025. And this film would not necessarily be for everybody. I don't know if I can recommend it to like all of the different people that ask me for recommendations for films, but I think for the right person and the right fit there, that it really works. Obviously, we're dealing with a relative. Joel Edgerton plays basically a person of non-importance, right? Like nothing he does in the grand scheme is changing the world or having some type of pivotal effect on society or anything like that. Like he is just a regular guy, right? And it's kind of retelling or going through the 80 years of this gentleman's life named Robert Grenier, who was living in Idaho. And this is during, the time of when railways were being built and constructed and things of that nature. So it's obviously a little bit of a blast for the past, but it just kind of shows this guy's life over time and the house over time and the area that he lives over time. And it's just a very interesting look at how different people can affect people long after they're gone, and how almost like that whole sentiment of like how you're like some people's life can just echo throughout time. And even though this guy necessarily didn't have a big impact on the world, and there's not like this family tree that he's leaving behind that's going to remember him, like once he's gone, like there's probably nobody that's going to remember him at all. But it's still this clever way that they connected the human experience and nature and all of these different elements. I mean, there is some tragedy that happens in here, which seems like another through line with a lot of 2025 films where they're dealing with some sort of tragedy or loss and things of that nature. But I was just captivated by the environment, by the cinematography of this one, which is I'm not always someone that's like championing cinematography, but like I think it's very well done here with the way they look at these ginormous trees that are in existence in Idaho, and all the different stuff that goes into them clearing a path for these railways and things of that nature. So I was captivated by it. I think it touched something in me that enjoys kind of reflecting and thinking about how time can affect not just people but locales. It's like one of those, like when you see I don't know if you've ever seen this like on memes or in social media or different things where they do like like a time lapse almost picture where they're showing something and then they're showing what it would look like 50 years from now if it was like uninhabited or whatever. Like I've seen some of those where it's like nature is just taking over the house or taking over the building or the business or whatever, and it's like kind of reminded me of those, and like that just always strikes a chord with me for some reason. So this one just kind of connected with me in ways that I didn't expect, and I really enjoyed Train Dreams. So that's my number 8.
Yeah, I saw Train Dreams. I enjoyed it a great deal. I do wish this one I was able to see in theaters because I think it would, as you mentioned, the imagery is really strong, and it almost feels like a time travel movie because he's in the wilderness, he's building these trains. You get a sense of like what the time period is, but then he steps out and he gets into like more of the industrial like city area, and it's like, oh wow, this is happening at the same time. They seem like antithetical to one another. It's like you have Oregon Trail over here, and then like bustling, the 1920s, 30s over here. It's like I think it helped represent how quickly the world can kind of pass you by within that. Yeah. And then there's some just quiet moments of beauty, like the scene with him flying in the plane. Like it's I think that was just I mean, Joel Edgerton, like you mentioned, is really good. Also, he was really good in that too. And I feel like I thought he might get some award recognition, but maybe just because it's such a it's a busy year. But William H. Macy, like his character is such a his usually a lot of the best parts of that film were surrounded by his character. So yeah, I enjoyed it a great deal as well.
The image like of a pair of boots or shoes or hat like nailed to a tree is something that like I'll never forget, I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah, I yeah. That I didn't even know if that was something they actually did, like putting those putting the boots on trees to represent someone being killed or anything like that, but it's very striking. Like I mentioned, it does show, as you mentioned, like that time lapse is a good allegory for it, because it very much is that, like, how much can change within time, and how much of that change you really can't control. But
Yeah, Mother Nature, or Father Time is undefeated. It just keeps marching through. So, what is your number 8?
Speaking of imagery, that's a big reason why my number 8 is a movie that impacted me as much as it did. And I think this is one you saw, but I don't think you were nearly high on it as much as I am. Another one I saw, one of the earlier films I saw in 2025, and it is On Becoming a Gay Fowl. The story centers on basically this woman is driving along early in the film. It's almost like looking like Missy Elliott in this costume, kind of odd and strange. And then you see she drives along and she finds a dead body in the road. And then the story unfolds from there. Their relationship becomes a bit more apparent as the movie goes on. And I think it touches upon a lot. I mentioned imagery, the use of water, like this. There's so many scenes in this that just, there's a level of like surreal design where you see people kind of like soaked in water. There's a scene of her like walking through this hallway, and it's not fully clear if it's meant to be literal or not, but it's been stuck in my mind ever since. The director who directed this, I think a few years ago, did another film which I have not seen, but I still want to check out. I'm Not a Witch, which I've heard great things about. But I also thought this too gets into that complicated relationship of death and grief, when maybe the person who died is not the greatest person, and how families will tend to, in a way, protect themselves by maybe hiding the truth and the conflict, and if that's really a great idea or not, and how that impacts women especially. And speaking of scenes, like the end scene of this is one that sticks with me. I don't want to give it away for anyone who's not seen it, but basically involves a lot of disagreement regarding what should happen because of certain events, and how a lot of it is just based upon people unable to face the reality, unable to kind of see what's really happening because they simply think that's impossible because he's a great guy or whatever that may be. So that has really stuck with me as well. Again, I went in this, I did not know any of the actors or directors beforehand, so I thought that was quite a way of approaching it. And like I said, just that imagery, it just has stuck in my mind ever since the beginning of it. Like, never heard of a guinea fowl before this. No idea. I mean, I've heard of a fowl, but I didn't know of the bird, but learning also what that means eventually. But so with that, it's one I had. It was one of my favorite films halfway through the year, and it still remains here at number 8 for me.
I think it too, like, even though you're probably learning a whole different culture and a part of the world that most of us maybe are not as well versed on, so it has that element. But I think at the same time, it speaks to, I think, Dan, and especially anybody of our age, for the generation that are, depending on how things worked out, the generation that either your parents or your grandparents were a part of, which I find interesting at times, because it is definitely that generation that doesn't talk about anything uncomfortable, right? Like, I feel like there's a certain generation within the baby boomer, those that are, probably between the ages of, I don't know, 70 and 95 these days, I guess. But like, they don't talk about stuff that was uncomfortable. They don't talk about trauma. They don't talk about anything bad that happened in their past or in their family history or just anything. Like, maybe not, I'm not speaking like 100% of all people that age don't do that, but it seems like it's a common thread where certain members of that generation just won't speak of that or won't go there. And you did get a lot of that from a lot of the elders in this society that didn't want to entertain it, didn't want anybody to make waves and things of that nature. So I definitely did connect with that part of it for sure. I think it's almost frustrating to watch, right? Because you're just wanting to scream at the people that are involved and be like, knock some sense into them somehow. Like, be like, do you not get this? Do you not understand what is happening? But it's definitely a decent, interesting look at, like I said, a culture that most of us probably don't know a lot about. All right. For my number 7, I'm going to actually have to thank you for this one because we did a check-in about mid-year, I think, as to far as like how 2025 in film was going at that point and what kind of stuff we had seen in the first half of the year that we liked and things like that. And you brought this film to my attention. I watched it, I think, within that like first week after that, and it has been in my top 10 ever since. It's been in different spots in the top 10. It's kind of bounced around from here and there, but it ends up here at number 7 at this point in time. For me, this is the funniest film I saw this year, I believe. I don't know if there was anything I laughed more at. Maybe it just hit the right type of humor for me. But I am actually going with the comedy drama British film, The Ballad of Wallace Island, with directed by James Griffith, written and starring Tim Key and Tom Basden, as well as Carey Mulligan. But this is about a folk duo who reunites to perform for a wealthy fan on a remote island in the UK, and everything that happens. Again, another way that you could tie in time to this one, because we're talking about this folk duo who had, previous mega success and then had gone their separate ways, broken up as far as the musical group goes, etc. And we're talking about a passage of time that has taken place, and then they are being kind of forced to be together again for this quote unquote concert that is being put on for an audience of, I guess, what ends up being an audience of 2. But it's just interesting how they navigate that dynamic of being with each other. Another theme of kind of exploring past trauma or past relationships that may not have worked out, and how that's going to play all these different years later. And I just found this film, I don't know if it's just because of Tim Key and his comedic stylings, if they just work for me more than others, but I found this movie absolutely hilarious. So I had a lot of fun with this one, and the music part wasn't too bad. I like films that have a little bit of music writing, singing, or whatever involved in it too. So it kind of worked on that level. But I thought all 3 of these characters, Carey Mulligan and Tim Key and Tom Basden, really played well off of each other. And I don't know if there was too many films I had just more of a, not really, there wasn't too much. I know it's a comedy drama. I know there's a little drama here, but like, I honestly was just having fun with the film the whole time. Like, I didn't feel necessarily any weight, where a lot of these other films that we're talking about carry some hefty, like, dramatic weight to them, and this was a nice change of pace for me. So The Ballad of Wallace Island, thank you, Dan, for recommending, comes in at number 7 for me.
Well, I'm super excited that you enjoyed it as much as you did, and I'll just say we'll talk about it maybe soon. So
okay,
there you go.
What's your number 7?
My number seven was my most anticipated film going into 2025. So you would think maybe it being at number 7 is a disappointment. It really wasn't. But it is 28 years later. I was really looking forward to it because 28 Days Later is one of my favorite horror films of all time, one that I tend to rewatch more than any other movie. And knowing that we're finally getting this, Danny Boyle was coming back to it, I was really intrigued. And then the trailer came out, and legitimately like one of the best trailers I can think of in quite some time. So a lot of, with that, you just think maybe it'll be disappointing, and it really wasn't, and for a lot of reasons. And it was a very different experience than what I thought it was going to be going into it. It starts off conventional enough. You have you clearly, the world has changed. You see that. Also, it's interesting that this completely ignores 28 weeks later. It just kind of just shoves that to a side, but it's fine. I like that movie well enough. It's got its issues, but I enjoy it. But, then it keeps developing. Just seeing how the world has been changed, just seeing how they also kind of had it's like evolving the idea of zombies, similar to how the first one did, where I know they're not zombies, they're infected, whatever you want to call them, but they were fast, and now it's added to that even further. Seeing them evolve, and what I really did not expect from this was the level of humanity that it had the thrilling sequences. I know Danny Boyle also, like, they used a bunch of like iPhone cameras and things like that, and you have some of those kind of in your face editing techniques and things, and those had a lot of splash, but it was the humanity of the film and also like the empathy of it as well. Especially where I guess it's not a spoiler since the third one has just come out. Ray Fiennes, when his character shows up, and the film drastically changes in a way that you wouldn't expect for like a blockbuster franchise movie. I don't know if it's a blockbuster franchise, but it's within that vein. So I found that approach actually quite moving, in the way it becomes this father or mother son story. It's a father son story to begin with, and then kind of changes into a mother son story and where that goes. And certainly I feel you can see how maybe the impact of something like COVID may have changed the way they approach this. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I really enjoyed it. Like it felt like one of the smarter, summer blockbuster films we've gotten in some time. I have not seen the third one yet. I hope to see it soon, but I just haven't had the opportunity to do that. But I do think this is one I'll probably return to more. I've only seen it once, and I really wanted to go back to it, but I didn't have the opportunity. But quite enjoyed it, and looking forward to seeing like where this franchise goes, because I know it's supposed to be the first of a trilogy. So I would say the ending is kind of weird. It feels like it is, again, another drastic change. That's maybe the one element of the film I wasn't the biggest fan of. But beyond that, I quite enjoyed 28 Years Later.
I think Ray Fiennes and Alfie Williams are pretty fantastic in this film. Alfie Williams playing the main, I guess, child character, Spike. And I think it's probably the best made film out of the trilogy, obviously. I mean, and I know it's not fair because 28 Days was on like they had like bubble gum and like scotch tape that they got to make it with. But which adds to kind of how kind of authentic and why so many people respond to it well is because they were able to pull off what they did with no money, basically, it seemed like, involved. And,
yeah.
Obviously 28 weeks later is a kind of a different story. This one's one that I think can either go up or down for me depending on what they do with the next one or two installments. Like, I feel like it's hard for me to judge until I know, not that it doesn't stand on its own and it can't be its own film, but I feel like some of the Bone Temple that's already been released this year, and if there is another one after that, could alleviate some of the issues I had with 28 Years Later. So I don't want to like unfairly judge it if some of it still worked for me. And I mean, it's still one of those, like when I talked about like, the top half of my list, like 35 films that I felt pretty darn good about. It's in that group for me. There was just some minor things that I was like, I don't know if this part worked for me, but it could completely work if, they address it in a different way in one of the other films. So it's kind of hard for me to judge it prematurely, I think. But I enjoyed it overall. For my number 6, if you had told me, so Dan just followed this with his most anticipated film of the year, right? Was like, boom, here it is. It made my top 10. That always feels good, right? Like, half the battle is just making sure that your most anticipated film comes out that year. And then, if you rank it in your top 20, I feel like that's a win, because a lot of times you get disappointed because you've hyped yourself up too much. So you're going off of one that you had like very highly anticipated. I'm going to go one that I would have never predicted in a million years would have made a top 10 of mine. This is way more Amanda's bag than it is mine. But this film I feel like it's the best version of this story I've ever seen. And it's a fantastic director. So, like, let's give some love to good old Guillermo. I can't say it. Guillermo. Gosh, I'm going to have to edit that. Guillermo del Toro with Frankenstein from 2025. I am not someone that loves like the gothic supernatural Nosferatu, Frankenstein, Dracula universe of, and all the different films that come out within those. That's way more my wife's jam. and she loves all of that. So I went into this with like, I'll watch it because I know my wife's going to enjoy it, and I do like Del Toro, so I think that'll be fun. And my goodness, like I was blown away by this one. I just thought this was like the best version of Frankenstein I've ever seen. I think Jacob Elordi is magnificent. I thought this is kind of like what you were just talking about with 28 Years Later. Like if we got blockbusters every summer that were like Frankenstein and 28 Years Later and some of that stuff, I'm fine with that. Like I'm good with that. Like, granted, not all of them necessarily get theatrical releases these days and all that jazz, but like I'm fine if the summer blockbusters have a little bit more to them than just these paper thin things like we get with like the Jurassic Parks and the Transformers and the some of that we seem to get on repeat every year. But and I know some people have issues with the first half or the second half or different things within this film. I thought it all worked. Like Oscar Isaac's fantastic, pairing him up with Jacob Elordi and getting to seeing that, and Christoph Waltz. Like I'm a big fan of his. So there was just a whole lot. I liked how much time they. Or maybe not how much time, but how well Del Toro was able to make me. It's his specialty, right? Like he gives the monsters, quote unquote, in his movies heart, and how much he made me care about Elordi's character here as the creature was just impressive to me. Like I think there's a lot of visual stuff to love. I think there's a little bit more nuance than you get sometimes with this, and it didn't go necessarily just like the gore way that you sometimes get with some of these films where it becomes almost more of a slasher and things of that nature, which which is not my cup of tea at all. So I just had a lot of fun with Del Toro's Frankenstein, and I was not anticipating that, and maybe that's why I liked it so much, was because I had somewhat set the bar low, but I am a big fan of Frankenstein from 2025 here.
I will say, yeah, I am shocked that it's in your top 10. I never would have guessed that you going into it. Like, that was, I don't know what the odds were, but I certainly would not have put it down.
It wouldn't have been good.
Yeah. But yeah, I liked it too. It's not my top 10. It's like, I think outside of that, but I did the Jacob Elordi. Like his to me is up there as one of my favorite of the year. Just like I think you certainly see like him being influenced by like Boris Karloff, from the original Universal films, but he puts his own spin on it. So I always hate when people say he is acting with his eyes, because I'm like, who does that? Everybody, dogs. But a lot of that is like his like, there's, speaking of humanity, like there's those scenes with he's like in the basement and there's like a little stream, and you kind of see leaves going through, and there's just so much to that in the way he approaches it. So, and it's not easy to do when you're under all that makeup. Something about Del Toro, like he's able to get people who can do great performances, like the Doug Jones,
right?
Even though the most elaborate costume possible, not easy to do. So very nice. That's awesome. I'm so glad that you enjoyed that as much as you did.
Yeah, I think it was the first time I've ever felt like the creature in this story was like real, like a real, like, I don't know, like somebody with emotions and depth and stuff like that. I've always viewed like the creature in all the Frankenstein stories as someone that was very hard to like relate to, or very hard to like view as anything but a creation. And like this one definitely made it feel like an actual like living, feeling, emoting, breathing like being. So I think that worked a lot for me, which is, like I said, it's Del Toro's specialty. I don't know why that surprised me.
Yeah. Have you seen any of the original like Universal Frankenstein movies, like
not in there like from beginning to end? So like most of my experience with this is like probably schlocky like 90s nonsense and stuff like that.
Interesting. Alrighty. Well, going from one well-regarded director to another, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on this. It's probably one of the most talked about films of the year. I don't know if it'll make your top 10. Maybe it will. But my number 6 is One Battle After Another. Unfortunately, I do wish I was able to see this in theaters as well, especially the final car chase sequence. I can imagine like that must have been even more thrilling. But again, like it's. I feel like this is one of those films that's going to because it's. I'm guessing this is winning Best Picture. Seems like a lock for that, and it's going to win a lot of awards. So with those accolades, it tends. I feel like it just you get the overrated banner and all that, but ultimately the film itself, I thought it was not at all what I thought it was going to be. Like the way it opens up, it brings you right into this world. It's this ultimate chaos. It's a bit weird in a lot of ways. Like I was just taken back by it, but in a good way. And then it kind of settles in and kind of goes off from there. There's a lot more comedy than I expected, some odd comedy, but you have great performances throughout. Sean Penn is playing a character with a capital C. Leonardo DiCaprio is just kind of going out of his mind, but it's certainly a film that feels much of today, very much a reactionary piece to what's going on in this world. In a lot of ways, like I love the scenes of him upset because he doesn't know the code, and it's like this is not important. Let's focus on what's important. That feels like it's very much speaking to a lot of what's going on today. So overall, just really liked it a great deal. And I am, I do tend to like Paul Thomas Anderson films. Like, don't love everything. Like, to not like Inherent Vice that much. I love The Master. Like Pizza, I was lukewarm on. Didn't love Phantom Thread, but loved There We Bled. So I guess I'm more hit and miss than I realized. But One Battle Another was definitely a hit for me. So I have it at number 6.
Right. I will save my thoughts on that one. For my number 5, let's just keep the directors rolling here, so we can go from Del Toro to Paul Thomas Anderson, and then just let's go ahead and throw a Steven Soderbergh into the mix. This was one of those that it's interesting because you have films that you see early on in the year, and I feel like they're fighting an uphill battle to make your top 10 at the end of the year. Like, I don't know if it's just because of how much time passes between when you watch them and when you finalize your top 10, or just because, you have so many movies that come out after that can be better than them necessarily. But every once in a while you get one of those that you watch like in the beginning of the year that just stays the test of time and sticks there the whole year. This film has been in my top 10 the entire year. So I'm talking about Black Bag. I think this was the second film I saw this year. It might have been the first film I saw this year. Either way, I feel like it's literally been it was in my top 10 before I had seen 10 movies, obviously. And then as time progressed, I never saw enough movies to knock it out of the top 10. Like, this is just again, perfectly executed film from Soderbergh, I think. Like, a spy thriller in a completely different way. I mean, how are you not going to love a spy thriller led by Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett? Like, that just seems like it's a good recipe. And then Soderbergh directing, and David Koepp is I believe the writer on this, who has been a little bit hit or miss, but he's done some pretty decent stuff as well. And I just feel like they were able to do so much in this film that was not necessarily predictable. I mean, these dinner sequences that they have are just crazy. The interaction and the relationship between Blanchett and Fassbender's character it's like sexy without having any sex in it almost. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like Rico Suave sexy because of like the people involved and how they do all this and whatnot. And it, keeps you guessing a little bit with the thriller part. But I think they were able to do a lot with not involving too many set pieces, there's these, usually you think spy thriller and you're like, oh, we're going to get some car chases and we're going to get some like all this other stuff. And like, this is like, nope, let's dial it all back and let's just rely on acting and dialogue and, just a little bit here and there. And I just thought it was expertly crafted. I know some people are just like in love with all of Soderbergh's things that he's done. I don't know if I have seen as much as everybody else has, but I liked Kimmy, Logan Lucky recently. I'm not going back to like obviously the stuff that everybody knows him for from earlier on, but like I feel like this is near the top of my list of Soderbergh films, and it just stuck with me the whole year, and nothing really bounced it from my top 10. So Black Bag came in here at number 5 for me.
Yeah, I enjoyed Black Bag a lot. I feel like we had a lot of movies in 2025, maybe not a lot, but a good amount of movies that were adaptations of plays, and Black Bag feels like a movie that could easily be adapted into a play because, like you said, so much of it is just people in rooms having conversations, but you have great actors that can do that. It's a spy thriller that where you're kind of sticking with the guy in the chair. You're not really even going out. There's no James Bond, nothing like that. But
and even the times where they go out into the world, we're watching it through cameras.
Yeah,
for most of the part. I mean, not like 100% of it, but it's like even then we're still behind the chair watching it from a distance. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, so it was quite good. Yeah, it was like you mentioned, it's right now at 16 for me, but like I said, like 8 through like 20 something, like 24, 25 are very close. So it was quite good overall, and with great performances throughout. Again, number 5 is another one I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because it's, again, probably this and, it was 2008. It was There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men. And like, it was like those were the 2 movies that were like everyone got on different teams and like people got ridiculous. And then we had La La Land and was it Moonlight? I think
Moonlight.
Yeah. So this year it feels like it's one battle after another. And on the other side is Sinners. And that's my number 5. Another movie, again, I wish I saw in theaters, especially because even seeing it at home, the way it uses the aspect ratio and kind of slowly gets into like what was like the IMAX screen, even on your home, it was still really great to see, even in like, my TV. In general, I think if anything hurt Sinners for me was that I did see it so late. So it was built up to be this, it was hard to meet those expectations going into it, but I still love so much about it. I was so excited to see, because I know there's been a lot of conversation regarding like Michael B. Jordan's performance and like Timothy Chalamet, which I got, but to me, like the performance of this movie was actually neither of them. It wasn't neither of Michael B. Jordan's performances, which I thought he did a great job. But I thought the star of the show was very much Delroy Lindo, who's been an amazing actor forever. And finally, he got an Oscar nomination for the first time ever, which is great to see. I thought he was so good in this as well. The music, the approach. Of course, people talk about that infamous scene behind it, that of like going through generations and what it's saying. I think it's going to be one of those movies that certainly has staying power. And just Ryan Coogler kind of he's been like a director I think people have long respected for. He did Fruitvale Station when that came out. That was in my top 10 that year. So was Creed. Black Panther wasn't, but I do like Black Panther. But it was interesting seeing him work to create this movie out of whole cloth. This isn't based on a real story. It's a completely original idea. He's the writer and director, and I feel like this is going to be one of those movies that it's like Sinner-esque. It becomes its own thing that people then refer to. I'm like. So I liked it a lot. Like I said, performances are great throughout. Haley Steinfeld as well. She was really strong. Jack O'Connell, who I was so happy to see. He's in one of my favorite films over the last like 10, 15 years, Startup. He was so good in that. I'm like, oh, he's going to be the biggest star ever. And he kind of like, it didn't happen. He got in a couple movies that just didn't, like Unbroken, which thought it would be something, and kind of thought it had an opportunity to become something, and it wasn't. So, but then he comes back and he's like the villain here, but also clearly a movie that has a lot to say about culture, the idea of oppression, and immigration, like how that ties in to the story of the Irish and the story of Black America as well, and how those are connected. There's a lot to take out of it, and like I said, I said I wasn't going to say a lot, but I guess I am saying a lot. But yeah, so Sinners, and again, I think it's a movie I'll probably end up liking more and more as I watch it again. But it's my number 5 for right now.
Sweet. I'm feeling real good about my 4 prediction, Dan. So I will move on to my number 4, which I think might be the icing on the cake here. We'll see. So this is going to be let's see, I got to do some real quick. 1, 2, 3. This is going to be my 3rd international film, I guess you could say. That's on my list. So I feel like I've evolved since 2019 here. All of a sudden, I got documentaries and international films and all that kind of stuff flying into my top 10. This was one of the cram session films that I actually watched leading up to this record. And, it was one of those where you have like 10 or 12 or 15 films in your queue that you're trying to decide which ones I'm down to only being able to pick like a couple more. Like there's going to be 2 more, there's going to be 3 more, like which ones. I'm so happy that this was one of the ones that I selected to watch before we did this. So I am going with the Jafar Panahi film. It Was Just an Accident here at my number 4. So this is obviously a film by the Iranian director. He is Iranian, right?
Yes, yeah.
I don't want to get my countries wrong here. And that again, another one that indirectly plays with time, right? Like we're dealing with a fact that there is a group of former Iranian political prisoners who our main character, Vahid, believes himself to have found one of the main people that was in charge of torturing them, questioning them, tormenting them, however you want to describe that, and basically kidnaps the individual and then gets involved with some of his other political prisoners to try to figure out if this is in fact the person that he believes it is or not. He's ready to get his vengeance and justice. He's dug this guy a grave already. And, at one point early on, this isn't a spoiler alert really, because it happens really early in the film. He's basically ready to, kill this man, bury him alive and be done with him. And then, there comes into play the question on whether this is in fact the right person that he thinks it is or not. And then the rest of the film is kind of exploring these prisoners over time now. They've been removed from this event. I'm not certain as far as how much time. It could be a short amount of time, could be a longer amount of time, but there's been some time that has passed since this all happened, and how they decide to cope with that trauma and the whole idea of justice and or vengeance or revenge, and how they balance that within themselves. These are what we're led to believe are mainly, good people overall. And are they able to do something that they would probably otherwise have viewed, bad people doing in order to get this justice or this vengeance against this individual? And how do they cope with that, whether they do it, whether they don't do it, whether this is the right guy or is not the right guy. And I just think it's just so expertly crafted by Panahi. And it just has you, even though it's in some respects almost, I don't want to say like ho hum, but it's somewhat like this slow pace, like a bumbling group of people that doesn't really know what they're doing. So they're not 100% executing this on a professional level, right? Like they're struggling with this whole situation. And so it's kind of like this slow progression as they deal with this individual, but somehow that still has you on your edge of your seat, waiting to try to see how everything is going to happen and what the end game is and what choices these individuals are going to make. And I just thought it was a brilliant film by Panahi. So It Was Just an Accident comes in here at my number 4.
And we might talk about that later. Who knows? Right. But I think this is the first time we're actually, with my number 4, going to officially cross over. And this was my favorite film halfway through the year, and it still remains here within my top 5. and you talked about it already, and that's the Ballad of Wallace Island. You said a lot about it already, but I think when I think back to this, the thing that comes to mind most, the top of my mind, is just the performance of Tim Key, who may give my favorite like supporting performance of the entire year. He just has a sense of humor that very much clicks with me. Like he feels like he could be easily like a character in The Office, or something like that. Very like matter of the fact, like he's not trying to be funny, like he's not trying to make jokes, or when he is trying to make jokes, it's funny because of how unfunny it is. But there's just a lot of heart with it. Also, I do love folk music, so I know that probably makes me super uncool, but that's okay. I haven't been cool my entire
Me
life.
too, Dan.
So I'm not worried about that. So and the fact it's all original music too, like it's not, and it feels like music that could actually exist. So that has me bought in. Like I didn't even check to see if it has like a soundtrack that's available, but I probably should, because I'm sure I would like to revisit some of those songs. But as you mentioned, like we're talking about a lot of films here that are very heavy, very, even something like 28 years later, it's still about like, very heavy themes. Wallace Island has some of that. I mean, it certainly gets, especially there's a scene involving someone walking in the ocean and where that goes, but also ends up being a bit comedic as well. So it is a nice, I don't know if you'd call it a romantic comedy. Would it fit into that? It's almost like an unromantic comedy, if anything. So, but yeah, had a lot of fun with it. It's, if I were to look at my top 10 and like which is the movie I'm probably going to watch the most, it's definitely going to be this one, because it's not one I need to like, I have to be in the right headspace for, because I'm going to just enjoy myself the most. So
I think too, another thing about this one is I like that, because the trendy thing these days, it seems like, is to have like a super fan or almost an obsessed fan that is painted in such a negative light, right? Like it's like all the evils of being like, of liking something too much in pop culture, whether it be a celebrity or a singer or actor or whatever. Like it's always about that like stalking aspect or about that like unhealthy obsession. And this guy is like obsessed, I guess, in a way with this duo, but it's nice to see it executed and delivered in a way that's, it's just innocent. Like it's just, he just likes them, and like there's nothing wrong with it, and it's okay to like a group or a show or whatever to the extreme, I guess, in this situation, if you're doing it in the way that he does it. So I just found it like, even though it like seems absurd on the surface value, it's like you just fell in love with everybody involved in this, and you're like rooting for him even though he's kind of crazy.
Yeah, just because you could easily have this set up and it be a horror film, because it doesn't take much change. But it is not that. His earnestness, I think, is what really powers it. Even though, I mean, I guess you could argue he's the main character, but I don't know. But he is the Tim Key's performance is, and it has me wanting to go back, and the person who directed like that Cuban dancing film which I thought looked like was awful, but maybe it's better than I realized. So I may go back and check it out. Who knows? But
yeah, I just give him credit, like the fact that he was able to pull off what he pulled off and got these two on this little remote island somehow. Like kudos to you, my guy. Like, definitely. And they didn't just turn around and leave; like they stuck around. So for my number 3, and man, I really internally battled with myself on where to put this one, because I was really tempted to put this at number 1, and I was just worried that it was too much recency bias for me that was causing me to want to do that, or it was because it was such an unexpected enjoyment from a film that I got, that I was like, do I put this as my number 1 film of the year or not? And right now I have it at number 3, but I have a feeling it may stick with me and may raise up as time goes. So, Ballad of Wallace Island was a UK film, and then we had the Sentimental Value was an international film, Swedish, I think, and then we had the Iranian with It Was Just an Accident. So let's just keep that going, and let's go to another international film here. This is, if you were going to tell me that going into this year that a Belgian-Dutch independent film about the kind of a coming of age drama about a 12-year-old boy that's kind of having a sexual awakening and, coming of age story, like in my top 10, I probably would have been like, I don't know if that's really going to connect with me. Like I am not 12 anymore, and I'm not familiar with much about, the Belgian Dutch area of the world and everything else that's involved with this. I was like, maybe that would work. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But Young Hearts is a film that just blew me absolutely away. It came out in most of the world in 2024, but it was released in the United States in 2025. So I'm qualifying it here. But this is about a boy named Elias who is just living his life as a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid here in this area. And then a new neighbor moves in basically directly next to him, next door neighbor. And it's a boy of the same age named Alexander. And it just kind of explores their relationship, their friendship, as we have this kind of coming of age tale, I guess, as what happens with most boys as they are in that age period, somewhere between 10, 11 and probably 14, 15, and how they start coming to terms with a new world for them and what it's going to be like for them to, go from being a kid to being an adult and things of that nature. And, the director of this film his name's Anthony, I don't know if I can say his last name, Shatman. I don't know. I can't find anything else that he's really done that I can watch or base it off of. So it seems like this is his feature film debut. I think he's done some other smaller works and things like that. But I was just super impressed with how he crafted this one and directed it and how this was shot. And I think one thing it really was able to execute in my mind almost perfectly was when you're dealing, and maybe this comes because I've spent some time teaching kids of this age as well, so maybe that played a part into it. But and just like our own experiences when we can think back to that age, I think this film really captures the twists and turns that go on in the life of a 12-year-old and or 11, 12, 13, whatever age you might be when you're kind of going through that. But like all the different ways that you view your view of the world changes, what you view as important, your different relationships, like how your coming of age impacts those around you, whether it be your friends, whether it be your parents, siblings, things of that nature. It deals with all of that in different ways. And I think there's a way that when you are that age that you just really have that tunnel vision, right? Like the only thing that you can see is your world and your perspective. And you can't step back and see things from a larger scale. And also it's something where everything at that age feels like it is the most important thing in the world, right? Like you probably see that a lot with kids of this age where, something happens and it's like, oh, their world's over. Like, just kill me now. Like, I want to go hide in a corner and never be seen again. Like, that's how you think when you're that age. And this film like captures that mentality so well in a lot of respects. He has I wouldn't say necessarily a strained relationship with his father, but he's going through what I think a lot of boys go through with their relationship with their dad at this age. I can't speak for myself because I didn't get to experience that, but I assume that that's kind of what happens. Fathers don't know exactly how to interact with, their kids as they become teenagers, and especially when it's a male to male situation, like because a lot of males, struggle to understand each other's emotions and kind of navigate that. So I think there's a little bit of that. He has an older brother, which there's some stress or strain between them. And I just think it's an interesting way how it navigates all of that. His classmates, his friends, his significant others, his family, like it just does a brilliant way of kind of following. And like the two actors in this, like Lou Goosens, who plays Elias, and Marius de Sager, who plays Alexander, are freaking phenomenal. Like, I don't know where they came from, what their experience was before, but they like knock it out of the park in this. Like, they're so, especially like obviously Elias gets a lot of the attention. He's the main character that we're following, but Marius de Sager, who plays Alexander, is just so charismatic on screen that it's easy to buy into everything that's happening here. And there's just some very cool shots involved that I'm not usually someone that sees that, but I think from a cinematography standpoint or from a photo standpoint, like they do some very cool shots of this. This may also have, like, if you're ever doing like a top 5 list for best grandpas in film, you should watch this film, because there is a grandfather figure in here who may be like the best grandfather figure I've ever seen portrayed in film. Like, he's just so wonderful as far as how he interacts with Elias. And I have heard nobody talk about this film. Like, maybe I'm in an island here and everybody else will be like, you're crazy. But I haven't heard any attention. I haven't heard it come up on any like conversations. I haven't heard anybody do a review on it. I even check Letterboxd, and I'm not friends with everybody, but I follow quite a few people. And like, once I reviewed it, I always check to see like how other people talked about it, and like there was nobody there was nobody in that little thing that had seen it. So I'm like, well, can somebody go see this so I can talk about it with somebody? But so I highly recommend this. It's called Young Hearts, Belgian Dutch independent film from this past year. So that is my number 3.
I do have good news. I actually did see it. I saw you review it and like gave it such a high rating. I'm like, oh wow. I like you mentioned, I have heard nothing about it. I'm like, what is this? And then I saw it was streaming on Canopy, which also let me investigate the fact that my library has Canopy, which I didn't know. So I was able to create a Canopy account, watch it, literally finished it like 20 minutes before we started recording. So I didn't feel like I could put it on my list because I still kind of processing it. But like you, I thought it was really well done. Like you mentioned, the grandfather character is great. Like his little speech near the end, which felt like sometimes those can feel like very manufactured. Like this old folksy farmer has the wisdom of of 1,000 years, but it felt true to heart though. It didn't feel too. It wasn't overly written. It felt very just honest, and I think that was a key element to it as well, and how it approached it. Like, often when you see a film, especially about like kids in high school and 9th grade, all the kids feel much older than they really are. But these these are actually 9th grade kids. They feel like of that age in OpenSea. So yeah,
I feel like some people may have. I feel like some people may have a problem with the fact that there isn't more. May feel it's unrealistic that there's many people accepting of what's going on and what choices Elias is making, but I don't necessarily view it that way. And I think it's another thing that's interesting is he's like so convinced that everybody is going to react that way. So it's like I felt like that was a good way that they could show how much you get inside your own mind without realizing that everything that you're worried about is actually fine, because all the people that you've surrounded yourself with are actually going to support you. Like that thought never crosses his mind. Like he's convinced that, this person or that person is going to, very much react in a different way than they do. So I thought that was interesting. Did you happen to notice the sequence that I was talking about at all, with the shot where they're sitting side by side with each other? And it's I think it's in the first half or the first third maybe. And then it goes into like a reflection shot. I can't remember if it's reflecting off of water or a window, or I think it's water or something. And then you just see like Elias turn and look back at Alexander. I don't know, like that shot for me was like wonderful.
I think I know what was that when they kind of did their day trip. They kind of went away and they're on the train. Is that? I don't know.
There's a sequence. There's a sequence where they're sitting next to each other. I think on a outside somewhere. I'm gonna have to rewatch it because it was one of those where you're like, I wonder if you're starting to feel like he's thinking about this individual in a different way. And it's like it's panning away, and you're like, oh, we're not going to get to see it. But then in a reflection, you get to see him turn around and kind of look back at the other child, and you're like, oh, yep, that's definitely what's happening. So I would recommend as many people as possible go watch this one.
Definitely, yeah. He certainly struggles. You certainly see like he's not like he has those people that are initially like you're changing, you're different than I thought. So he gets a little rejection, but it's a good progress overall.
And I forgot to mention, I also really appreciated maybe some people would say it's too on the nose. And I know I'm talking a lot about this, but I'm sorry. But
fine.
the whole like Romeo and Juliet through line that's kind of threaded very differently throughout this whole film, I thought was very interesting because again, that's another forbidden love story, and I guess they're living their own like forbidden love story, so to speak. And I thought that was kind of clever how they intertwine that throughout the story.
Yeah, I will say, felt like parents are gonna let like kids like have a sleepover like that and like not be like just be okay with it.
Yeah, it was definitely like something that we're foreign to now in our society.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't. Maybe that's the thing there. I don't know. But then I'm like, I guess maybe they're ninth grade.
They're also riding their bikes like throughout the land with. Like, I don't feel that's done anymore in the United States. Like I don't feel like it was when I was a kid. Like we could grab our bikes and go wherever we wanted to. I feel like that's not happening anymore.
No, they had much better. Yeah, and much better public transit as well.
Right.
All right. So that you said that was a director debut, and looks like, or at least future director debut. My number 3 is the same as well, though this one is getting a much more conversation about it, and a lot more people talking about it, and that is Eva Victor's Sorry Baby. It was her directorial debut. She also is the star and the writer. She's kind of doing it all, which not easy to do, but also can kind of understand why. And I was luckily able to go into this, even though I saw it late. I just know people were talking about it. I had no idea what the story was, so I'll try not to spoil it for those that have not seen it. But it kind of just centers. She's kind of the main character. The story begins where like her friend comes to visit her. In a while, she's currently like working at a college, and then it flashes back to kind of get you caught up to where they're at. Clearly, something happened in her past, and you kind of learn what that is and how and like how it's impacting her in the future as well as in the past. So what struck me about this mostly was how specific the tone is within this, because there are so many bits that are that they kind of turn and have elements of comedy that you would not expect, but it also kind of feels right, and how it kind of manages that throughout is quite amazing. And this being her directorial debut, I think you do have some like one of the most impactful shots is just sitting in the outside of a house and where that envelops, but also when you see it, how it approaches anxiety and how it represents anxiety, I thought was really quite remarkable. You have other great performances as well from Naomi Aki, who plays her friend, who I think adds a lot of personality to it as well. And you could say this is a bit of a message film, but that's not necessarily. It's not just about one event per se, but it's kind of the driving force as well. And then, you have some like really great performance, like really great scene with John Carroll Lynch, who every time I see him, I just think of the thing I think about is him and the Drew Carey Show. But you forget, like, oh, he's actually a really good actor that's been in like 1,000 movies and probably has like almost steals the movie with like one of the scenes in this that kind of comes out of nowhere, but I think helps bring it all together. So I just thought, it was the way it approached all those different pieces of trauma and how it was able to have that delicate touch while also being kind of like slyly comedic at times really struck a chord with me. And like I said, I thought the performances were very natural and stuck out. So it was, for a while, it was my number 1, but then I watched my 2 and number 1. But like this, my 1, 2, and 3 are very close. So right now it's at 3, but who knows what the future holds. So
the problem with watching like 15 films in the last 2 weeks before you do this? Sometimes you may watch a film and you may even go onto your Letterboxd and write a review for it and give it a star rating. And then you may forget to add it to your list of films that you watched that year. So that's exactly what happened with Sorry Baby for me. And you can see my review and you can see the star score. If I had put it on the list of films that I had seen in 2025, I'm thinking it probably would have ended up in my top 10.
Nice.
But it's not on my list anywhere. So I'm just scrolling as you're talking about it, and I'm like, wait, I know I have this somewhere. Why is it not in my list here? And I think it might have made it all the way up to my number 8 if I had remembered to
Oh,
rank
wow.
it. So yeah, I thought this was for somebody filling the role of the writer, director, and lead actor. Like Naomi Ackie was like I'm gonna have her on my radar for like what does she do
Yeah.
next, because like it was so impressive. And what I really really enjoyed on this film is that it didn't need to spoon feed us anything, and it didn't need to do what happens so many times when it's dealing with the types of subject matter it's dealing with. It didn't have to show us. Like it
Yeah.
didn't need a shock factor. It didn't need any graphic representation of what this whole thing is kind of juxtaposed against. Like it made it, I don't know, not just, it wasn't that it was just easier to watch. It was that that's not needed. And it was able to instead focus on the aftermath of it and the coping mechanisms of it, and all of the other things. I'm trying to dance around this, but I just really appreciated that part about it. So yeah, I definitely had this as one of my highest rated films of the year, and I'm just dumb for forgetting to put it in my list of movies I watched this year.
I get it. It's easy to do.
That happened.
So what did make your list at number 2?
Well, I'm going to be pretty chalk the rest of the way. So this is a film. The interesting part about my number 2 is that when I first watched it and first slotted it into my rankings, I think it was in the 12 through 17 range. Like it was not in my top 10 when I first ranked it. And then a little bit of time passed and I was thinking about it more, and it kind of crept a little bit closer to like the 12, 11, 10 stage. And then a little more time passed and it got into like the 6, 7, 8 stage, and then eventually it crawled itself all the way up to number 2. So this is one that I just feel like has grown on me the more time has passed, and I feel like once I finally get a chance to watch it a second time, it would definitely solidify itself. But this is where I have Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another. I am like you, I think, when it comes to Paul Thomas Anderson, because I was not a big fan of Inherent Vice. The Phantom Thread was okay. I actually missed Licorice Pizza, so I'm not 100% sure on that. But, you know, obviously There Will Be Blood is fantastic. And I feel like this is like a kind of a return to that type of feel of his. And I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio is every bit of a movie star in this one, right? Like he is showing like why he's stood the test of time. And Benicio del Toro is just freaking amazing in this film. I could have watched a bunch of more sequences of him being involved. And then the what do they call the group? The Christmas Adventurers Club or something?
Yes, yeah.
Like, that's just hysterical, but not hysterical, because it's like, maybe that's not so far removed from reality and things of that nature. So it's like, well, it's like it's on one hand like satirizing or kind of poking fun at everything we're dealing with, but at the other time it's like so not, because it's so real. And it's just, I don't know, but I was definitely not anticipating what I was going to get with this one. I didn't really know what to anticipate with Paul Thomas Anderson, because I'm like, he's been all over the map for me. So how is this going to work out? But you know, Chase Infinity is fantastic. Like there's almost everybody involved in this is, I don't know if there's anybody that I didn't think was fantastic in this. So again, I think with a second watch, it'll probably make it even more solidified on my spot here. But I just felt like the more time had passed, the more it kept climbing the ranks. I was like, there's so much to this film to digest, and hearing some of the discourse on it, I was like, oh, you know what? That's right. And, you know, I did agree with that and things of that nature. So, and it is, even though The Ballad of Wallace Island to me is the funniest film that I saw this year, probably, there is some hysterical moments in One Battle After Another for sure. And again, another one that you could kind of tie that thread with the passage of time, because, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio's character is part of this movement in the thick of it at one point, and then we really fast forward, whatever it is, 15 years or however many years, and it's like, this guy that's completely, I don't know. I feel like this would be me if I tried to go play softball again, right? He can't remember the passcodes to his thing, and I would forget how to swing a bat or something. I was like, so like I feel like he's definitely kind of in that like rusted. The guy has to shake the rust off before he gets this figured out, and it's hilarious. The sequence where the group that Benicio del Toro gives Leonardo DiCaprio, and they're bouncing from rooftop to rooftop. And DiCaprio is trying to follow them, leads to one of the funniest moments of the year to me. And it was absolutely hysterical. So, so one battle after another. I know it's not a surprise. Everyone's talking about it. It's probably going to win Best Picture, but it's number 2 for me.
Yeah. Like I said, I could see, especially if I get the chance to see it in theaters, even enjoying it more. And more crossover, because with my number 2 is one that you talked about already. Again, another international film. So, and that being, of course, It Was Just Another Accident. And what really took me, and you kind of touched upon it a little bit, was like how you mentioned comedy. There's like a good amount of comedy in this as well. You could easily change this. You won't need to change a lot, only a few things, and this could easily be an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, with like just the way in which things unfold, and it's the complication of errors, the series of unfortunate events where things are going a certain way and then they kind of take a turn and come back. It is written like a joke in that way, like with callbacks and with punchlines in ways you don't expect. But I think that's all probably purposeful, because it starts, as you mentioned, with him discovering this element. He's going to kill this guy. He has all this righteous anger, but then doubt seeps in. And then after that, righteous anger subsides, it kind of brings you into a little bit of a lull. And you're wondering, like, so it has you questioning it too. And it has you wondering, like, what is truth? What is not? What are they going to do? And then you get this, like, even seeing the poster, it's just, which I think is like legitimately one of the best posters of the year in the sense of the simplicity of it, but it also just is pretty striking, because you have this van in the desert and you see what look like a woman in a wedding dress and the guy next to him in a van. Like, what exactly is this about? And how that all comes together is quite something. And then the ending, it like that, after that lull, you're like, okay, I guess maybe this will, end at, and everyone go home, or how it's going. And then that ending comes, and it's like, oh, all that comes back up, and it becomes all the more devastating, and how it stays within that scene, and just keeps going. And you have like the brake lights to like add a red tinge to it, like you're entering, to be a little literal, like entering actual hell. And then the other ending after that, and how it all comes back. So I thought it was just so well crafted within that. And, I've seen a few other of Trevor Buffy's films, like This Is Not a Film, I believe he did as well. But I found it, especially considering like he was actually in jail for a while, there was him making this, and it's a pretty big critique. Like we talk about brave when it comes to making art, and sometimes it's overused, but it seems very very poignant here. And it's also very, like, there's not a lot of specifics in the sense of, like, in a good way, like why were they jailed, like what did they do, like, what is the issue, because that's not really necessarily important, like what ties them all together. And I think that also makes it more impactful, because there isn't a specific thing. It could be anything. It could be anyone, and I think that very much is the point of it. So yeah, it's like I said, my top 3 are very close to one another, but it was kind of disappointing it didn't end up getting the Best Picture nomination, just because I'd hoped more people would see it. But I don't know, if you haven't, definitely check it out. It is streaming. Like, you do have to. It is only available for rent now, but I think it's worth it. So the $6 I think is certainly worth your time.
Might be the best use of sound effect of the year too.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So there we go. All right, so that leaves us to our number 1 films of the year at this point in time. But as we said, since time passages and changes a lot of stuff, you never know how that evolves over time. But this one to me is similar to Black Bag. It's been in my top 10 the entire year. And I didn't know if that would be the case or not after watching it. I had a feeling that it would, but I didn't know it would stay at number one. It's not only been in my top 10 all year, it's been my number one film all year. So again, another chalk pick, but I am definitely going here with Ryan Coogler's Sinners. It is just a fantastic film. Like getting to see Michael B. Jordan and another Michael B. Jordan like next to each other doesn't always work. Like we've seen it in different things where it does, and it worked in spades. And I think the way that they were able to distinguish those two versions of this character, the two brothers, Smoke and Stack, like it was just very well crafted and artfully done. And I think like Delroy Lindo has been one of my favorite kind of undersung people for a long time. I'm not just saying that because he's in this film and getting a bunch of praise, but like I've always kind of liked him and thought that he should get like more roles and more acclaim, and it was fun to see him get that. I feel like the way they intertwine the different like you said, both the Irish and the African American journey throughout America and through oppression and things of that they've dealt with. The way they tackle the music aspect of this throughout time was a lot of fun. There was obviously a very cool sequence that has gotten a lot of praise dealing with that. And the fact that it wraps this all up in this vampire setting, and like it's just kind of crazy how this all works together somehow. And for me to have two movies in my top 10, one that's dealing with Frankenstein and one that's dealing with vampires, is not something that I would have predicted, but here we are, right? So I mean, Coogler is pretty much hasn't missed yet. So I don't know where he goes from here. Like now the bar is pretty darn high. I don't know, like the anticipation for his next film and the hype that it's going to be a hard one for him to live up to. So I don't envy him in any way, shape, or form as far as that goes. But I just think that there's so much to like. There were so many people in this cast and so many characters to kind of enjoy as they kind of went through this. You do get like the limited setting, which I'm always kind of a big fan of, and I just think again, like I've only watched this the one time. I feel like both this one and One Battle After Another will just become better the more I watch them. And that's what kind of led me to leave Sinners where I had it all year, which was in that number one spot.
Nice. I'm glad. Yeah, that's awesome that it's stuck there, and I completely understand why. And it's certainly deserving of that spot. Yeah, it's interesting that, again, like going into this year, or if you were told me the plot of that film and what it was about, I would not have guessed that would be like a movie that would hit your top 10. So the fact that it is, I think, speaks to it as well.
I'm breaking things through here, Dan. I got Frankenstein. I got vampires. I got like 4 international films. I got a documentary. I don't know who I am, Dan.
I know. Not one animated film,
Nope.
But not the greatest year for animation. Maybe that's why. But
right.
But my number one we have not talked about yet. Another one which I think probably isn't getting a lot of attention, and part of it, I think, reason why it was number one was because it's that unexpected watch. Because I went into it similar to like my number 10, didn't hear much about it. It was one that I had stored in my Netflix queue because it looked interesting. It looked like it was my vibe, and exactly was my vibe. And that is Left-Handed Girl, directed by Shi. Also, there is some connection that people may be aware of because one of the producers of this, as well as one of the co-writers, is Sean Baker, who's known for Nora, which of course won Best Picture, Florida Project, and Florida Project is one of my favorite films. I still haven't seen a Nora yet, so I can't speak to that. But I love Florida Project, and Left-Handed Girl has a lot of similarities in the way that film is approached. The story is very different. The story is very simple, honestly. It's about this family in Taipei. It's a mother and 2 daughters that they've come back to their home city, and the mother is kind of trying to make things work. She has this little like noodle stand, street stand that she's working at. Her daughter, her oldest daughter has her own thing. Clearly, there's a lot of friction between them. She's kind of a bit of rebellious. She's more like later teens, I would say, maybe early 20s. She recently graduated. She has a younger daughter, probably 5 or 6 or so, around that age. Probably not quite old enough for kindergarten, more maybe around that. And she's the star of the show. Nina Yi, she is the actress, and she's remarkable. It's again another performance similar to Florida Project, where you have a lot of kids in that, and it's kids acting like kids. They feel very authentic. Same thing. It felt like you probably almost like documentary-esque in the way it approaches the story. She's kind of going around, just kind of living her life. And it's called Left-Handed Girl because she uses her left hand. And the reason why that's a big deal is because in their culture, and there's a lot of traditional teachings where the left hand is a devil's hand. So her grandparents don't, speaking of, like, we talked about a movie with great grandparents, it has the opposite of that with grandparents who are not that great for a lot of different things I don't want to spoil, but they kind of pass judgment, and there's a lot of family drama within this, but it's my favorite type of film because it's just people living their lives. Like, you see that with Richard Linklater, you see that with Sean Baker. And what's interesting, too, is the person who directed this, they actually co-directed a film like early 2000s together. So I'm interested to see, like, it seemed these individuals, Shaoqi and Sean Baker, this movie Take Out in 2004. So they have a lot of connections throughout the year. So question is it that person informing Sean Baker or vice versa? I don't know. But I'd say this: if you enjoy his other films, I think you would definitely enjoy Left-Handed Girl as well. And you see like this conflict of tradition versus today, conflict of a mother trying to protect her daughter, and how sometimes that can go too far and kind of double back and end up causing more harm than good. There's some plot developments near the end that I did not know what were going to happen, but certainly adds a lot to it as well. But I didn't even need that, and I was already bought in. It also doesn't have like any specific easy answers, anything like that, but it was completely my vibe. It's completely type of movie I really enjoy, and because of that it ended up, as I look back in this year, the movie that I felt like had the biggest impact on me, the one that I felt the most invested in, surprised by, like, checking all those boxes. I thought it has great performances throughout it as well. It ended up being Left-Handed Girl. I feel like I'm probably selling it too much for a lot of people, which maybe, people will think it's just fine, which I get. But for me, it just ended up being of 2025.
Yeah, this was another one that you had mentioned to me kind of towards the end here, and I just didn't find a way to. Is this streaming somewhere? I forgot to ask you.
Yeah, it is on Netflix. That's where I saw it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
right.
how,
and that's how I watched it, because it kind of came up as like recently released, and I saw it. I'm like, oh, produced by Sean Baker. I'm like, that's interesting. And so I was, just one of those things where you put a movie on, don't know what to expect. I do nothing about it beyond the title, and sometimes that's like the blind watch is like the favorite. It's really hard to do, especially now, because there's so much conversation out there, like you had with Young Heart. So this basically was my Young Heart, but I've watched this. There's been enough time since I watched it, so I felt comfortable putting it at number one. But
totally
I quite enjoyed it. Yeah, so if you want to check it out yourself, you can check it out on Netflix. As of this taping, who knows? Because things come on and off there. But I think it'll probably be on there for at least a few months.
So Dan and I, we're going to give a few more thoughts with some honorable mentions and some thoughts on the year overall. But one thing that we are going to be doing is we're going to be giving you guys our own version of the Oscars, our Cinema Geek Awards lead Oscars, and in the leading up time to that, I'm going to make a point to watch the 3 films on your top 10, Dan, that I have not seen. Hopefully you'll get a chance to see Sentimental Value, and then
Yeah.
obviously hopefully both of us get a chance to see like Hamnet and Marty Supreme and maybe a few others. So we'll come locked and loaded with that when we get into that award show. So I guess because I'm silly and forgot to include one, we did end up with 4 crossovers. Dan, it would have been 5 had I put Sorry Baby in its rightful spot, but otherwise we did have Sinners, One Battle After Another Was Just an Accident, and The Ballad of Wallace Island. So more crossover. If we had Sorry Baby in there, we would have half our list on the same. So that was always a surprise. So that was kind of cool. Nice. Is there any ones that just didn't, that hasn't come up in either one of our discussions that maybe was in that 10 through 20 or something that was just kind of missed your countdown that you want to bring up?
Yeah, at 11, I had Wake Up Dead Man. Actually, I watched all of the Knives Out films for the first time this year, so
okay,
that was the experience. That was right on my top 10. I really did like that a lot. Another kind of blind watch Netflix movie that I know nothing about, and this was also in my top 10 for a while, but that was Homebound. This is an Indian film about basically 2 friends that are trying to like find a way to rise above their station. They apply to become police officers, but there's 1,000 applications or 1,000 openings and like 3 million people applying. But it kind of goes through their journey and the impact there, and then also how COVID impacts that part of their life. Weapons, another really popular film. I actually did really like Weapons this year. And maybe a movie I'm giving a little bit of a hometown bump, but I really love The Baltimoreans by Jay Duplass. It's kind of it's a bit of a romantic comedy, like a one-day movie about kind of this unexpected couple that kind of finds themselves through a series of strange events. Roofman, a movie that I ended up really liking. Because it was not at all what I expected. I should have realized it being Derek Cinephants, but I thought it was going to be more of like a slapstick comedy, but actually had some real drama behind it. So I enjoyed that a great deal. You mentioned Black Bag. Hedda, one of the most uncomfortable watches, but in a good way. That movie is so intense. I just watched this yesterday, but Twinless, really like that a lot. It has... The way it structures its film, I thought was actually quite impressive, and how it impacts your experience with certain characters. I'm trying to say vague because things happen and I don't want to reveal, but I like that a lot. And then Begonia, I really liked. Nouvelle Vague. I'm just naming movies. And then the last one, another movie I don't see a lot of conversation about, but is Sovereign, which. With Nick Offerman, which is now on Hulu, and it's tough. It's a tough watch. Yeah. Nick Offerman's great in it, but yeah. So, anyways, that's a lot for me. I'll send. Sorry, I'll send it back over to you.
Yeah, there's a couple that I haven't seen yet in my still on my watch list, and they're also No Other Choice is still on my watch list. I haven't been able to catch up with those, but as far as ones that did just miss, it was in my top 10 for quite some time, but got bumped out due to the last minute cramming. So I did have a House of Dynamite actually up towards the top. I know a lot of people didn't go for that, but I thought it was a very intriguing look at kind of almost this like vantage point type deal where we kind of go through the same situation, multiple different angles and different perspectives. And it worked for me. So I had that on there. I agree. I had Roofman in this group as well. I really enjoyed that. It's probably one of the other films I had a ton of fun with this year that was also, I thought, good. A couple more documentaries. I have The Perfect Neighbor. Thought that was another one that was really unsettling and kind of weighty. I'm a huge John Candy fan, so the I Like Me documentary was, I thought, pretty well done and an interesting watch as well. As far as a couple other ones I wanted to mention, Lurker, I guess a different side of a crazed fan from A Ballad of Wallace Island. This is like the complete opposite. So I thought that had some interesting points to it. I actually dug The Last Breath with Woody Harrelson. I thought that was fun. And Big Bold Beautiful Journey with Colin Farrell and Margot Robbie. I thought that was something that worked for me from Kogonada. unlike Black Bag and Sinners, which were on my list in my top 10 and survived the whole year, Mickey 17 was on my top 10 list early on, and it got bumped quite a bit over the time of the year that went there, but it did end up still in my top 20. And then I think the last one, I do want to rewatch a few. Like, I probably want to rewatch Weapons, Highest to Lowest, EFIS. I want to rewatch all of those. They're in my top 30, but I just didn't feel comfortable knocking them or putting them up too high because I had some issues with it on the first go around, but I feel like I want to watch it again. Like you said, Sovereign, it was in my top 25 as well. Got her in the watch and she loved it and she's become obsessed with that whole franchise. So now I've seen almost everything that you can see about that, but I thought it was for me the entry point into that franchise. So I did like that. And then the last one I will mention did not get love from anybody. It got panned by quite a few people, but it is up my alley because it's just kind of like this sci-fi, make you think and make you debate things. And that was Alicia Vikander in The Assessment, which also starred Elizabeth Olsen, Himesh Patel. And I get why some people didn't care for it, but I love those types. Like, that's my type of sci-fi jam. So that worked quite a bit for me. So those would be the ones that I would highlight. Dan, when you think back at the year overall, how do you feel like 2025 was, or was there any takeaways for you that you kind of were left with at the end?
I thought 2025, like, I had a good time with it. I had a lot of, like we said, a lot of films I felt really comfortable with making in my top 10. Certainly seemed, like we mentioned, a lot of movies that are very pointed regarding the world today, and that makes sense in a lot of ways, especially with the documentaries, things like that. But even some of the the more blockbuster films, like a 28 years later. But I thought it was a strong year, and like I still have a lot. You mentioned that I haven't seen or other films, but it feels very spread out this year. Like I think it's I don't know if they're. I guess you could say One Battle Another and Sinners are going to be the ones that stand out throughout. Probably as people look back at this year, but I also think it's very deep. Like it's got a deep bench. It's like the Spurs, right? It's not, you don't necessarily have a Michael Jordan that is the franchise player, but you have just a lot of really good, solid movies, and that was my experience with this year overall. So a lot of surprises. I didn't have many disappointments. Like not a lot of movies I was hoping for ended up disappointing me. There was a few here and there, but nothing huge. I also stayed away from a lot of the, like, I didn't watch like the Amazon War of the Worlds, for example, because I know like everyone hated that. So, but yeah, how about yourself?
I think like the only disappointment for me was probably the Phoenician Scheme. I thought that was slightly disappointing.
Yeah.
But not majorly disappointing. It was just slightly disappointing. But I think there's a couple different things that stood out to me. Obviously, I talked about the passage of time, so I won't like beat that into the ground. But I think you get that in a lot of these as like how somebody, whether it be a person, a place, or just society changes over time. I think that's explored. And I also think there's a lot of these that deal with reactions or how to deal with trauma, whether it be in the immediate aftermath or as you grow and age, how you deal with it. I think that's seen in quite a few films that we see. And I don't know if it's just because everybody feels like we're going through a traumatic time, so they're trying to like dive into that and be like, hey, this is how some different ways you can cope with this. But I feel like that was definitely evident in quite a few of the better films that I saw this year. And I agree. Again, I don't know if there's one that's like the Her for me, or like like Ex Machina was for me, like those years that came out and things of that nature. But I think it was just so solid from, half the films I saw, I would highly recommend to folks. So I don't know if that's always the case. I haven't done the math, but I feel like there was just quite a few that I was given a whole lot of 3.5 and 4-star ratings this year for sure. I think that's probably the majority of my ratings are 3.5 or 4, and then like a decent amount just 3. But I didn't give a whole lot of anything underneath a 3. I also didn't give out a 5, so it's kind of like in that ballpark. So it's definitely a fun year to get back involved with movies on this level, and I'm kind of catching up with a few more of these and kind of seeing how it all plays out.
Nice. Very cool.
All right. So if you guys have any comments for our films that we listed in our top 10, you can obviously reach out to us on social media. You just look up Comic Concierge or Optimus Solo or Cinema Geeks. You can find us on the various social media platforms. What we have coming up for you guys soon is we're going to have probably our most anticipated films of 26. We will work in there relatively shortly, maybe our next episode, I don't know. And then, like you said, as we get closer to the Oscar season, we'll do one more look back at 2025 and hand out some awards as we get ready for that. Dan, any closing thoughts on episode 200?
No, like I said, it was a good year. Looking forward to now taking time to look forward to 2026, see what this year has to offer. I know we did it with the box office predictions, but now it's more so seeing like what is going to be in our top 10 this time next year, and that's always fun.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I've already kind of done some brief preliminary looks, but I'm interested to kind of focus in here and decide, especially with some stuff that I've been hearing already about some other films may have knocked some of them out of contention for me, but we'll see where we go with all of that. So, all right, that does it for this episode. Tune in next time for another chance to listen to more of the Cinema Geeks.